The 21st century is being transformed by new types of sensors and solar cells that weren't possible even just a few years ago. In my research, I'm focused on looking at materials that might work better in the really messy, difficult environments that sensors and solar cells might be operating in the net. So first, looking at a typical biosensor environment might be in monitoring saliva or monitoring something in your eye. Lot going on there in terms of all the different ions, cells, other things that that sensor might have to come into contact with. Normal sensors that we have now would typically be using metals and other inorganic materials. But we're interested in thinking about these soft, squishy organic polymers that are flexible, stable, porous, they have lots of big gaps and openings in them, and have this really interesting ability to allow ions and electrons to flow, which dramatically changes the material, which might make a really good sensor, because that big change means we can sense just a small change in whatever we're trying to analyze. But again, they're very messy because they've got all these impurities, all of these pores and openings where other materials can come in and intermingle. And so we want to understand how these materials work better to try to build these better sensors and solar cells. Again, these can be used to improve cancer diagnosis, identify patients likely to benefit from a drug, or even image low-level brain activity. But again, those messy materials make actually controlling and using these devices pretty challenging right now. So our approach is to combine these sort of three corners of tools that we have. Nanoscience, which we'll use to pattern and deposit these sensors and solar cells. Organic electronics and devices, that's what we're building, these sensors, solar cells, and we're going to build and test them and try to figure out how they're working or not working. And then we'll go back and compute what's going on in these materials, devices, and experiments to try to learn as much as we can from each of the devices that we make or solar cells that we build. In the background, the types of techniques that we'll be using are microscopy, spectroscopy, and electrochemistry are some of the things that you could use to do this. And we sort of have a loop here. We do nanoscience, build these devices, compute what we would expect, how that compares to what we did, and then we can use that to build a better device. One that we're currently working on in our group is this nanomolar glucose biosensor. So glucose has a millimolar concentration in the blood, in the micromolar in saliva, and down to the nanomolar in the eye or the brain. And detecting glucose in the eye or brain can be really important for detecting the early onset of glaucoma. So we're going through that process for this nanomolar glucose biosensor right now. Definitely you're welcome to work on that or a related project. Come talk to me about that. Another key technique that we have that can really give us a lot of information about these materials is learning about what's going on in the individual materials, how the individual ions are moving around in different regions. So normally what people measure is just on average what's going on in their material, what's called a bulk property. So we look at this, the ions moving, and we just sort of see on average they're all moving at the same speed because we're just sort of getting one number or measurement. But what we would like to have is to look at exactly what's going on. Some ions are moving fast, some are moving slow, some areas of our device are working well, others are working poorly, so we can get a lot more information by knowing what's going on the nanoscale. A tool that we have to do that is called scan probe microscopy. That lets us scan this sharp tip down around our sample and actually measure, okay, this ion is moving quickly, this ion is moving slowly. Really powerful technique that we both perform experiments on and model in our group. So lots of different projects that you could do. You could build some of these sensors. You can do a lot of the modeling or computation as well. We've had funding from various sources to enable you to learn computational chemistry, Python, or another sort of computational aspect, which I think is a really cool opportunity. You can get paid next semester to just learn Python and then have that skill to use later in whatever you go on to do after this. So I'm really excited to talk to you. I also have some research on virtual lab environments, so I'm happy to talk about that as well, educational chemistry education research. My website here is munano.org, so go to that to learn more. All this research makes me very excited like Matthew, so I'd love to talk to you. Thanks.